encaramos la última parte de la
So
conferencia.
we're coming up against the final part of the conferences, and as I mentioned at the end of the conference, we're going to try to get closer to real companies. You know that the conference ends with an investment forum, which will start at 3 p.m. And to prepare this, we're going to, first of all, have a panel to talk about entrepreneurship and innovation in Latin America, and the moderation is going to be Eduardo Salazar, who's a venture partner at 500 Startups, one of the most successful funds in Silicon Valley, which is having a very interesting expansion in Latin America. Okay. It's great to be here. I'm going to start in Spanish and then we're going to move over to English. So, my name is César Salazar. As Pedro mentions, I manage 500 startups in the region, and I'm going to present to you our presenters this morning. They're very interesting people. I've been talking with them since yesterday, and I've loved what they're going to share with you. First of all, I'm going to present someone local. And he's been working for Colombian entrepreneurship for a number of years now. And today he directs a company called Yuma. So please welcome someone who also has my last name, Eduardo Salazar. And also, we have someone who's visiting us from far away. He comes from the United States, and he's been an entrepreneur who's been working strongly for a number of years. The founder of a company called Upstart, and he's also been helping the United States government through his international aid agency, USA, to develop better projects for entrepreneurship. Let's welcome Scott Wu.
Okay, now I'll switch to English. Thanks, Scott, for joining. So this panel is going to be about entrepreneurship and innovation in the region. It's going to be about the opportunity that we see in LATAM, also the challenges that we might share. And we have different perspectives here. So I am speaking about mostly access to capital. That's what I do these days. Eduardo is probably going to share more about the entrepreneurial challenge. And Scott has a hybrid view, but probably he will tell us more from the entrepreneur perspective, but as well the advisor perspective or the investor perspective. So I'll stop talking right now, and I'll let Eduardo start a conversation with a very brief presentation.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. When I was called from EmTech, I was told I would like you to share your experience and your journey in entrepreneurship. And I asked them, "Are you crazy? My career has been a little bit orthodox, but if you give me 15 minutes, but if you promise you let me talk and then you let me out afterwards, then I have no problem." So what I'd like to share with you is why this is called biology lessons. That's the introduction I wanted to make. And it has to do with, I was talking with Alex Torrenegra a few minutes ago. And I think that if we have a bit more biological perspective of what's happening, we would find some very special forces that act on this topic of entrepreneurship. The first thing is that these low-density ecosystems, these regions where innovation is a very recent fashion, where entrepreneurship is only just becoming a legitimate method for creating value, requires a lot of adaptation, and my career in this has been an example of this, of adapting, starting with the cliche question that says there isn't a lot of money in these regions, but the thing is that money for entrepreneurship is like water for plants. Too little dries them up, but too much drowns them. And so what is exactly the right amount of money for entrepreneurships to flourish? So the first company that we started up in financial services Historically, this is a sector where, without a lot of capital, we couldn't have done much. But that wasn't true. But because of the model and because of what we were doing and because of what the entrepreneurs was doing, the company could grow into the first wealth management company in Colombia that doesn't belong to a bank. And the other thing that has forced us to adapt a lot in these regions has to do with using technology to solve simple issues. This is the high-tech solutions for low-tech problems. So this is an enormous space in these countries. The problems one sees in health are enormous, but they're very basic issues. What they require is solutions with enough technology, and not just the discourse of cutting-edge technology for cutting-edge issues. These regions are marvelous spaces for emerging technologies that will resolve existing issues. And this is a provocative point of view for a number of entrepreneurs. And so I have an anecdote. We recently founded a company called Agrofuturo, and the only goal was that the countryside in Colombia has received enormous amounts of subsidies, but has never received intelligent money, and this has been a recipe for poverty. So how can one take well-designed financial programs to the Colombian agriculture areas? And we've just created the greatest fund right now for Colombian cocoa in the Urabá region. And Alex was also mentioning that these Anglicisms that we use, the angel investor as such, I think that as a concept, that's not going to travel so well. I think that angel investors are the property of an ecosystem where there are other actors too. But in Colombia, I would like to believe that there's a group, I include myself, and we're wealth angels. We are interested in growth, not so much in the amount of money we invest, but the amount of time we invest. And there are investors, there are entrepreneurs who say, I got money from an angel, but I learned his name and I didn't get anything else. So it's more the ethos of being invested jointly with the entrepreneurs so that they can both grow. And so these ecosystems require great dosages of adaptation. And if we just tried to import things directly from outside, we would damage the ecosystems greatly. And like any ecosystem, we require dosages of extinction. And there are certain attributes that that we've heard recently that damage an emerging ecosystem. And there's the one-man show, for example, and it's a guy or a girl who thinks they know everything, and so we end up with very fragile organizations. You visit someone and they say, "Oh, I have this wonderful idea," and you ask, "So what's your team like?" And the guy says, "Oh, the team is secondary." So you think, well, do you really want to say that? So what things should we make extinct? I don't believe in entrepreneurship by a one-man show. I think that when we celebrate those stories of the Silicon Valley one-man show and one studies them in depth, there were never one-man shows. There was never this topic of rich and king. You have to choose one of the two. So this happens also in these regions as the ecosystem, the state, the institutions contribute money, that there are people who run behind the money more than the markets, who have what gets the feeling that there are people who want to get the grant and not get the market. So don't get the award first. Let the prize guide it, not backwards. And this is another of the attributes that I feel that at these levels of low-level ecosystems will need to become extinct. There are entrepreneurs who say, I don't know what company I want to launch. I'm going to wait for what they require on the requests at Impulsa. And so I asked them, is that your scouting? I don't think that's right. Satisfied customer, a product, is much more important than a grant, because don't worry so much about winning prizes, because prizes are fool's gold in the end. And the other thing is, I think that as we start trusting ourselves as an ecosystem, as entrepreneurs, we get stories that are, there are stories that are worthy of replicating and of imitating. We start to become a little iconoclastic. At the beginning, these topics have to be designed using algorithms, the Canvas algorithm, the pitch, the investment forum, and those things are okay, but we can't remove that refreshing vision, that emerging vision, that in entrepreneurship and innovation, there are no algorithms, there are no formulas, because if there were, then all of us here would be doing something else. It's the lack of formulas that invites us, that makes the space for reflection so marvelous and so far-reaching. Use the formulas that we've seen, but I think that something that's going to become more and more extinct is that idea of the empty canvas, the empty canvas entrepreneurs, people who don't really have the conviction of taking that idea and making it change the world. And so, in the absence of those things, algorithms are just empty algorithms. And so, looking at it from my perspective as an investor, as an entrepreneur, as a promoter of healthier policies in the ecosystem, these are things that need to become extinct. We need to leave these behind. They were necessary at one time. They were necessary to start talking about these topics. But as we grow and as we have this type of events where we find a flavor, then we can start saying, well, this is going to have to be left behind. And finally, this is something, a word I love. Has anyone heard of it? Acceptation? I'm going to explain it. So some of the evolution theorists, they say that the extremities and the capacities of mammals to walk, was it that we adapted and developed arms and extremities? It was that some fish had already developed an arm to be able to eat. And then those arms let them go outside the water and make and have adventures there. Acceptation is the ability to capitalize in another direction, an adaptation that you'd already developed for a different reason. And sometimes you reach this space for a different reason, and there's evidence that that the world has been developed more by acceptation than by adaptation. And what this means is this reflection that we have to have, that the ecosystem already has assets. It would be very difficult, it would be inefficient to say, if we were always asking, what are we lacking? I would invite you to think what we already have. Sufficiency and scarcity are two different concepts in ecosystems. There are always things to be able to do better and more performing things than we have now. There are enormous assets in our ecosystems. I would give you my prediction of three things that will grow more and more, that will be fundamental to continue renewing the performance of these innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystems. The first is a mentality of growth. We seem to have discovered that innovation and entrepreneurship are smaller brothers of growth. And growth is what's going to get established companies into innovation. It's profitable growth, which is a fashion in these companies, that's going to get and it's the people who are going to have extraordinary growth and who are going to be able to capture extraordinary value, the people who are going to get many of the entrepreneurs who don't recognize themselves as entrepreneurs today because it isn't fashionable enough, and they're going to start to enter the ecosystem. And this is going to be very important. The central word, my prediction, is that we're going to start to talk a lot more about growth, and this is going to be very good for us. The second thing is an acceptation of the decentralization of these countries. Mexico is a completely decentralized country. Colombia is a completely decentralized country. And this decentralization of the debate is forcing the discussion of the ecosystem that is turning ecosystems into regional innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystems. The Chilean model is Startup Chile. The Colombian model is Medellin Venture City, is Manizales Más. Other things are happening. And this understanding of the regions is going to be very important, and is going to be important to continue growing and consolidating. It's going to be important to start to move from a national ecosystem to start strengthening the regional ecosystems. It's important to strengthen this growth. And finally, this is a prediction that, having heard some of the stories of the TR-35s, is validated. And in the absence of sophisticated consumers in Colombia, in the absence of really competitive corporate dynamics, we're all in a dynamic where everyone is good. We don't do everything very well, but everyone is good. And it seems like entrepreneurship needs to break up that balance. So when we find value niches, who would have thought that the voice company is the size that to create two companies of the size that Alex made. And I have thought, is Alex's niche so big? Because if you look at it in Colombia, it's very small, but if you look at it around the world, it's gigantic. One niche in the world is much larger than a market in Latin America. So I see that entrepreneurs will more and more not adapt to the low productivity equilibriums, the low demand equilibrium that are found naturally in this, but they will start asking ourselves, what would happen with my idea if I did this? Nutresa took 35 years to become a multi-Latin company, and the small companies, the startups, are becoming multi-Latin right from the start, and they're small but they're bold. And it's going to be very important to understand this and to start favoring entrepreneurs so they can understand like that. The question is if you're sophisticated, if you're valuable, and if the problem you're solving it has a value that the world would be willing to pay to solve. Don't worry so much about the market here. I see a bunch of business plans that are closing when they include the global variable, and that's going to be marvelous for the global ecosystem. So they told me yesterday, don't worry so much about what you want to say, but what you want to achieve. So this is what I want to achieve. I want you to look at this equation. If in Colombia, one company, one high potential entrepreneurship were produced for every 150,000 inhabitants, what a year, we would be talking about 400 startups. We would change the economic destination of this country, of this region, and we would do it with the only proven mechanism for value and prosperity creation that has social mobility, that has social inclusion, and that rewards creativity and innovation above everything else. So that's my invitation. What can we adapt? What can we make extinct? What can we accept? And help me, those of you who have the magic to make this possible, to reach this goal. Thank you.